Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this digital session from the National Ergonomics Conference and the ErgoExpo. We appreciate everyone who joined us last month at the National Ergonomics Conference live in Las Vegas. It was a great event. If you missed it this year, we certainly look forward to seeing you next year. And we are pleased to bring you these digital sessions throughout the year. And today we have a great topic, one that I know we've talked about a lot, and there's been a number of discussions and questions about. So today we've got an expert panel here to discuss millennial ergonomics, a great topic for a lot of us who are involved in ergonomics. And our panel today will be moderated by Lisa Schuiteboer-Shuler. And Lisa, I'm going to let you take it from there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks for having us today. I'm really excited about this panel discussion around millennial ergonomics. I think it's a topic that's not discussed enough, and we have an absolutely wonderful panel here today that I will introduce you to in just a minute to talk through some of those trends that are here. To walk you through what we'll be covering today, as I mentioned, we'll introduce the panel, and then we'll also define who are the millennials. There's a little bit of question about what year it starts and ends. So just so we're on the same page for today's discussion, I'll walk you through that, as well as some statistics and stereotypes around millennials. When you say millennials, typically a stereotype automatically comes to mind. So we'll talk through some of that. And then we'll get into the panel discussion to hear from the ergonomists around the world today on what they are seeing as they're practicing ergonomics in all types of businesses. And then I'll end with debunking or embracing some of those millennial stereotypes that we have seen in the workplace and as we're going through the ergonomic process. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to all of my wonderful experts today. Rachel, I'm going to start with you. Can you give us a brief introduction?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us today. My name's Rachel Mitchell. I'm a Canadian certified professional ergonomist and registered kinesiologist and the managing ergonomist for Ergo Inc. in Ontario, Canada. I've been working in the field of ergonomics consulting and return to work for the past 19 years, and I'm the current president of the Canadian College for the Certification of Professional Ergonomists. And I provide consulting services in both office environments and industrial and manufacturing environments. So this gives us a great opportunity to sort of look at what we've been seeing over the last little while in some of these office environments.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And Lillian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yeah, my name's Lillian Antonio. I'm based over in the UK. I've been working as an ergonomics consultant now for around 15 years, whether that's in-house or with my own business now as the modern ergonomist. I work mainly looking at office workplaces, offering a range of services from ergonomic, workplace programs to assessments and trainings and seminars. I've also am part of the Well Movement Concept Advisory I've been working with for the past year as well.
Great, thanks, Lillian. And Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Sarah Snable. I'm a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist and Registered Kinesiologist. I'm also one of the co-owners of Pro Ergonomics. We're an ergonomics consulting and training firm in Ontario, Canada. So I've been doing this for over 15 years, sort of in a mixture of mostly consulting, but I've also done some in-house work too. Typically, I work a lot of public sector environments, so I've worked in healthcare and municipal, as well as some more private industry and some manufacturing. So kind of seeing how all of those different industries tackle office ergonomics. And so I'm going to bring my experiences with those industries to the table today.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. And to reintroduce myself, my name is Lisa Schuiteboer-Shuler, and I currently am the Global Ergonomic Category Manager for Kensington. And basically, I've been with Kensington for a few years now, really trying to bring innovative ergonomic products to the market. But prior to joining Kensington, I also served as an ergonomic consultant in the office and industrial areas. So as you can see, based on our introductions today, there's a wealth of knowledge and experience across the panel. And I hope you guys enjoy hearing the trends and look forward to the questions that we get around the trends out there as well. So to set the stage of who are the millennials, so there's a few years of differentiation when you look up some of the research, but for today's purposes, we are looking at the definition between 1981 and 1996. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that makes me a millennial, and I believe a few of our panelists as well. We do have to combat certain stereotypes that are there, and we'll go through those here in a few minutes. But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is even currently in 2021, it's 35% of the workforce. And the shocking statistic that you keep seeing advertised is that in the next few years, millennials will make up 75% of the workforce. By 2025, the baby boomers will be under 5%. And so what I want to look at is that statistic around the 75% a little bit deeper. I will say, based on the research that I found with millennials, a lot of times they are incorporating Generation Z, which is the younger generation, into that 75%. As you can see from the chart, in 2020, we had 43%, and then shifting to 43.1% of millennials. So there's a little bit of differentiation depending on where you're gathering your research from, of it, the 75%, or if it's actually lower, but that 75% of the millennial workforce by 2025 is actually including Generation Z. No matter what, though, the millennial and younger generation have similar stereotypes associated, and we certainly need to adjust our style of practice and relating to them as we go through ergonomics in the future. So some of the statistics that I wanted to bring up today, just to show you the type of client or customer you might be dealing with. You probably know several in your life if you are not a millennial yourself, is that they actually check their smartphone on average 150 times per day. I probably am guilty of that. If you have a smartphone, a lot of times a statistic will come through on a weekly basis letting you know your average amount of screen time. That average time for the millennial is roughly 5 hours a day on their smartphone, and that's not including the time that they're on their typical computer or if they have another tablet or smartwatch or anything else. Some of the more pertinent information when it comes to ergonomics and some of the issues we might see as well is that 24% of millennials lack any type of daily physical activity. So if you think about the increased amount of screen time and the lack of physical activity, you can see how that can be a potential recipe for disaster when it comes to ergonomics. Something really good, though, I think, is that 97% of millennials look at reviews before buying into something. A few people here may have heard of a little website called YouTube, and that is the millennials' favorite place to go to look for the reviews from their favorite influencer, or to look up different research before actually buying a product. There's another statistic that's not listed on here, but most millennials would actually rather buy a product that they're hearing about from an influencer or someone that's considered an expert in the field versus their family or friend. That is how trusting they are of the experts in the field today. And then finally, 75% of companies, they believe, are only focused on their own good. So millennials have a very, very strong inclination to want to support a cause or the community versus just themselves or the company that they work for. It's always for that greater big picture in the millennials' perspective. So some of the other stereotypes that we see is millennials want things personalized and delivered. If you have a Starbucks order, typically that coffee order turns into such a long personalized name, and that is a millennial's dream to have that delivered to them exactly the way that they would like it. The good thing for ergonomics is, as we know, it's an individualized approach, and millennials can really grasp onto that. They also crave constant feedback. So in older generations, it was more of a hands-off approach. They didn't need to know that they were doing a good job. But now with millennials and the younger generation, they're constantly wanting to know when they've succeeded and how they can get better at doing something. They also want an immediate response, which sometimes can be tricky, especially if we're short-staffed or bogged down with other work. But they really crave that fast interaction because of the technology and the way that they've always been around that immediate response there. One of the stereotypes also is that they don't have any work ethic. Now, I beg to differ on that because I am in the millennial area, but I do think one of the things that we have seen from the research is that they don't have office habits learned. So if you think about in the last 18 months while we've been going through the pandemic, a lot of them are fairly new, if not brand new, to the workforce. And they were thrown into working from home, not in a structured office, whereas people that are more seasoned office workers have been around that same type of culture, and it's a different type of change that they have to make to work from home. But for those millennials, to them, it was waking up one day on their laptop to look at YouTube, and the next day it's waking up on their laptop and going to work. So there's no habits learned of structuring their day properly. No surprise, but they are obsessed with technology. We are surrounded by it day in and day out, and millennials love to take technology to the next level and are constantly pushing for that fast change in technology. And then, as I stated before, everything must be for a cause. So if there is a recycled product or if the company they work for volunteers in a certain area, they want to know about those things. That's what's really important to that millennial generation. So this is going to lead us, after we've set the stage of the type of person we're talking about today, of how we might have to modify our ergonomic approach, or as we're thinking about solutions for today's workers when we're dealing with the millennial and the younger generation. So I'm going to be asking some questions today to go through our panel, and all of them will get a chance to speak, and we'll summarize each question as well from their answers. So let's start off with the first question. What is the most common need or complaint that you're seeing in the millennial population during your assessments and research? So Sarah, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. I find one of the things that we get a lot of questions for with the younger, the millennial generation is more like work from home or flex work options. And so, I mean, even pre-pandemic, it was starting where, addressing more home offices or more traveling, less of a structured work environment. And even the structured work environment is looking more for a collaborative piece. And then how do we kind of expand that to allow it to continue in a work from home or a remote work scenario. So, apps for connection, messaging, all of that kind of technology. I know we experience that within our own team as well. And so we are experiencing firsthand, not even just with our clients, but, in-house, noticing that we are trying to create more of a collaborative or a team approach while working remotely.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And Rachel, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I'd say that, we're seeing a fair number of sort of neck pain and neck complaints, and it comes from sort of two ends of the spectrum. So we've still got lots of folks who are working directly off of laptops. So, 8 hours a day, the head, bent forward, working directly off of a laptop screen that's much too low. And then on the flip end of it, I've got, millennials who just keep adding more screens to their desks. So they've got, 2 or 3 large screens, and then they've got their phone, and then they've got their laptop screen, and then they've got a tablet. And so we get this sort of table tennis effect where their sort of head is bouncing around trying to work off this larger number of screens with this perception. We all experienced when you first went from 1 screen to 2, that felt more productive. And so somehow there's this assumption that if I just keep adding more screens, I'm going to become more productive, rather than what I'm creating is, some neck discomfort from doing that. So having to address these sort of two sides of the, how do we set up screens and what is the correct number of screens to be working from?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And I know the screens just keep getting bigger too. So not only is it more screens, but larger screens at the same time. Lillian, did you have any other additional comments to add to this?
Yeah, and curved screens as well is my latest one that I'm talking about quite a lot more. But yeah, just to Sarah's point, I think a lot more people are really seeking that sort of idea of work-life balance. I think the pandemic has obviously, changed the way we've worked quite significantly, but there really is sort of craving that work-life balance, that flexibility, and being able to, be in charge of their work day. And then you, of course, mentioned the statistics around how much screen time millennials are spending on a daily basis. So yeah, things like neck pain, upper limb disorders, all of those sort of things are definitely increasing. And you see within the statistics over the past 18 months how that's really just accelerated things from, moving from an office sort of controlled workplace to home has really had a big impact.
Yeah, I think those are all really great insights. So as a recap to this question, as far as the most common complaints, Rachel mentioned the different areas of the body that we're seeing, the neck, the shoulders, with that ping pong table tennis type analogy that she mentioned, and the back pain, and those non-ideal workstations that people are trying to make work, whether they're working from home or as businesses are starting that flex work situation. And as Lillian mentioned, that flexibility, and a lot of times we don't have the equipment to support it and the knowledge of the behaviors that we need to support that flexible workplace as well. So the next question, Lillian, we'll start with you on this. So how have you modified your approach to working with millennials as far as the needs that they have versus maybe some of the other generations you've worked with?
I think for millennials, I think what I tend to find is that they want shorter assessments. They don't want to, be filling in lots of paperwork and things like that. They want sort of online quick assessments with quick feedback as well, and quick responses in terms of getting, the support they need, whether that's in terms of products or whether that's in terms of education and training. They sort of want that quite immediate response. I think that's the main one, I would say.
Always fast and always immediate with those millennials, I tell ya. Sarah, what comments do you have on that modified approach when you're dealing with millennials?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that for sure. Everybody's time is very valuable. And also finding that how people engage or how they want that feedback. Like I would say that there are some of this millennial, this sort of younger generation, the newer workers are more likely to want to try and play on their own. So if I recommend, I'm telling them how to adjust their chair, or if I'm recommending, something about their keyboard or mouse, they sort of take that feedback and try it themselves, versus what I find with an older worker, or the older generation, is that they might be more of a, well, do it for me, show me, do it for me. So I do find that I am sort of changing my approach a little bit depending on who it is that I may be meeting with. This would translate as well to training sessions, right? So making sure that we have sort of a mix of ways to engage with the audience depending on who's in the room. But definitely finding that they are a little bit more of a, let me try it, let me do it, not necessarily scared of, if I'm going to recommend a new mouse, they don't seem to be as scared about, let me see it. Probably comes back to your stat, actually, that they're going to watch a YouTube video review and make them feel more comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that personalization piece that you touched on is certainly key in that modified approach, that there's not one right answer. And when it comes to ergonomics, as we've mentioned, that personalization is key to fit really well for that worker and the job that they're doing. Rachel, did you have any additional comments on this?
Yeah, I'd say that I'm having more discussions, not just about today, but about 10 years from now. Because when you're working with a much younger population, you can get away with some terrible workstation setup, sometimes without any discomfort, because the body's a little bit more resilient. And so sort of having to have those discussions about, the decisions you're making about your workstation today and how you set it up today are going to have an impact on, the wear and tear on your body 10 years from now. And having to sort of balance that question about, I'm just trying to get it done now and I'm worried about today, and really sort of having more difficulty picturing sort of, what that looks like down the road.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, with the shorter assessments, sometimes it's harder to get that long-term picture into there. but certainly key. So to summarize some of the things that our panelists had said today around modifying your approach, certainly those shorter assessments, no longer those long drawn out assessments that even though they're extremely detailed, the millennials tend to lose interest quickly. You do want to focus on educating them, though, as we've mentioned, that they truly do have that mind for researching and trying different things and incorporating that style that really speaks to the millennials. As Rachel mentioned, the workplace is certainly changing. And as she mentioned on the previous question too, more screen time does not equal more productivity, and trying to understand that what that effect will be for 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when they're using the 5 screens plus the tablet and the phone, certainly is key to understand those long-term effects there. So to move to the next question, Rachel, we'll start with you on this one. What trends are you seeing in basically with certain equipment or different types of desk setups for the millennial generation?
I mean, sort of to go back to what I had mentioned before, I think more screens I am definitely seeing with this population, but also kind of a willingness to go out on the limb and even set up and sort of purchase their own equipment. So sort of not leaving it entirely in the hands of the employer, but sort of being interested in, what do these alternative mice look like? I saw I saw a YouTube video of someone using, some particular mouse and being interested in trying it, more interest in sort of sit-stand desks, not necessarily as a solution to an existing back issue, but kind of wanting to start at that point. So definitely more of an interest in sort of non-traditional office equipment, even if it means sort of doing that out of pocket on their own.
And Lillian, what about you? What are you seeing over the pond from us as far as certain types of equipment requests for millennials?
Yeah, very similar to what Rachel just said, really. I think millennials tend to be much more willing to spend some of their own money to ensure that they're set up correctly, that they're comfortable in the way that they're working now, whether that's because they've seen a YouTube video or, because they are actually starting to have the aches and pains that maybe we don't expect from that age group. There's definitely been a huge increase in assessments for people wanting sit-to-stand workstations as well, wrongly or rightly, and I think there's a huge education piece around sit-to-stand workstations to be done, but they are the sort of key ones that I see, and obviously simply because of the way we've been working more recently is this sort of mobile laptop kit, so lightweight equipment that they can easily throw in a backpack and go and work in these sort of different workspaces, agile working, mobile working, whatever term you want to use.
Perfect. Yeah. And Sarah, did you have any other trends in requests for equipment that you're seeing?
My trends are bang on with what these ladies are saying. I'm seeing a lot more work from home, like people are wanting to make sure that their home office is set up better. A lot of requests for sit-stand desks. And more people doing it more of a proactive standpoint. So they're not doing it because they have a back injury. They're asking about it. What do you think about it? And would you recommend it? Why and why not? In general, I would definitely say that I'm recommending fewer keyboard trays these days. Like that used to be a very common thing, and still it comes up, but fewer of those, more monitors for sure, curved monitors. I just find that even a request that I got recently, which I was trying to kind of come up with my ergonomic reasoning for why I would recommend it, is they wanted a keyboard that resembled more of a laptop feel, right? They know I'm telling them you can't work on your laptop on your desk. We need to prop it up. I'm like, but I really like this keyboard. So, even trying to recommend some input devices that have a bit of a different feel to it. So, because it's a generation that maybe is a little more familiar with a laptop and is having a hard time separating it. So those are some of definitely my trends are bang on with what the other ladies are saying. So that's reassuring.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point, Sarah, with the laptop feel keyboard like that people definitely want to work on their laptop because they like the look and feel of that. And so as an ergonomic professional, you do have to come up with that justification to get them off just the laptop, get to those external devices to be set up appropriately. So having those types of pieces of equipment available, it may be something we weren't even considering as much a few years ago, but with the increased amount of time that we're spending on the laptops, certainly something we need to consider more frequently. So as you guys all mentioned, they are more likely to self-purchase home office equipment. I think previous generations just waited for the company to provide them. But I think as we're seeing more people involved in gaming and or setting up their own home office or personal computer, they really are looking to have the best setup that they can at all times there. Also, the purchase of gaming chairs, not saying anything good or bad about gaming chairs today, but we have seen certainly an increase in that type of purchase in that type of population, with home offices being more apparent. And then the mobile laptop kits, basically having those must-have transportable items that whether you're working at the dining room table or at a coffee shop or even commuting, having that laptop riser, a shorter, compact, lightweight keyboard and mouse, and then even sometimes some sort of additional lumbar support or chair support. If you're working on that classic wooden kitchen chair, it might be necessary there. And then more interest, as it was mentioned, in those non-traditional mice, such as a vertical mouse or even a trackball. So on to the next question. Sarah, we'll start with you on this one. What major changes do you see in workplace wellness or ergonomics due to the increase in the millennial population as it's shifting over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think it kind of ties into that quick feedback and those kind of self-motivated and a little bit more of a tech-driven population. So I'm thinking that a lot that we're already seeing it right now, and I think it's just going to get more and more where videos, apps, things where people can, like sure there's YouTube, but even having a quick review on how to adjust the very specific chair that you're sitting on that the employer is providing, right? Like I kind of envision it being more self-serve, quick. They want those quick responses. They want it more tech-based, app-driven, and even just, looking at more, like if they are going to be purchasing equipment for themselves, like I'm finding that I've had people ask me questions like, do you think my benefits package would cover an ergonomic assessment? Or I think I might be able to use my flex dollars to cover a sit-stand desk. And so I think that that's going to be the way to sort of attract and retain the younger generation as well, is having some more technology, more app-driven things, quick answers, flexibility for sure.
And I think that's important to note, Sarah, that even though millennials are more likely to purchase on their own, they also are more likely to ask those benefit-related questions, as they want that personalized package and all of that greater cause that they're looking out for their employees and the community, not just the company itself. So Lillian, let's go to you next on this. What major changes do you see?
I think similar to what Sarah said, I think millennials tend to put a much more value on wellness generally. A lot of people are wearing their smart watches that are monitoring their health, whether it's how many steps they're doing, how much they're getting up and moving. So I think there's definitely a lot more awareness around that, and I think that will only continue as the technology improves. Like we mentioned as well, there's so many different apps to help you, do different things, either whether it's workplace-based or health-based. So I think that's just going to keep on evolving and changing. And I think, workplaces probably have to work quite hard to attract people into the office. And I think well-being and wellness is really, one of the key drivers for that, for getting people into the workspaces.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree with that, Lillian. And Rachel, do you have anything to add as far as other major changes you're seeing that we haven't mentioned?
I mean, I would anticipate, maybe not necessarily specific to millennials, but really maybe more specific to kind of the last 18 months, is that I do think that we will at some point see kind of a bit of a spike in reports of discomfort from people having worked for the last 18 months in non-ideal workstations without sort of taking the time to adjust them properly. So I think that's coming. And then I think, we've been talking a bit about sort of this desire to personalize things. And so I think companies are really going to have to think through sort of this one-size-fits-all equipment approach that has often been taken. So, will they have to get to a point where IT isn't purchasing a single style of external keyboard and a single style of external mouse, but maybe there are a couple of different versions available in a workplace where employees who are going in can kind of customize their equipment, but still with some constraints. Because I think, with the interest in new technology and new things, it doesn't always work to our benefit. We do see people who are, purchasing, some Kickstarter sit-stand desk, but it doesn't have enough height range in order to fit them properly, or people ordering some really weird and wonky mice that actually maybe are not going to be a good fit. And so I think we still need to think about keeping limitations or restrictions on sort of what that standardized equipment looks like, but having more options kind of within that pool of equipment.
Now, Rachel, this is an additional question that I don't have listed in here, but going back to those standard types of equipment, are you seeing that more from companies asking for a standardized list or staying within constraints, or do you think that's still kind of into the future?
I mean, I think that, over the last, number of years within companies, we do see them trying to put limitations. The simplest is on chairs, right? We've all seen the sort of bad things that happen when people can order whatever chair they want out of a catalog. They buy, the thing with the shiny chrome wheels that only goes up and down, and that's all it does. And so companies have been putting constraints, and I encourage companies to put constraints on what can be ordered so that there's a kind of subset list. But I think things like keyboards and mice, IT just sort of buys whatever comes with the computers, and we really haven't considered what that looks like. And I think with so many people returning now to, these sort of hoteling workstations where I might work in a different workstation every day, we really need to think through how we make those workstations more customizable to the people who are coming in to use them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we still have some work to do in that area, but I would agree with that trend that I think as more people are working from home, they're trying to figure out what that next move is in making the standardizations, but we still have some ways to go, I think, on it. So as far as the summary on these ones, the wellness values increase. So basically, as you guys all mentioned, there is more of a focus on the employee well-being. The increased discomfort at a younger age with that larger amount of screen time that we're seeing, that 5 hours of smartphone time plus the 7 to 8 hours plus of computer time, we're really seeing that discomfort start much, much younger. And on top of it, my daughter's school district starts with technology as early as kindergarten, where everyone has their own iPad. So if you can think about those habits at such a young age going into the actual workforce, they've already been exposed to a lot of issues early on. So they're also struggling with that back pain at a younger age due to those non-ideal setups. And as we mentioned, the craving for the app-friendly or all of the collaboration and software initiatives where we're on video constantly like we are today versus being in person. Those are all things that we certainly see changing and probably increasing. And then, as it was mentioned, millennials are not scared to ask about ergonomics or well-being packages in their benefits. And so I really, really hope that we do see more and more companies offering that as a part of their benefits package and being an everyday item there. So Rachel, since we ended with you before, I'm going to start with you again this time, if that's okay on this question. But how do you think the pandemic has affected the millennial generation and the working conditions? If you can name a couple maybe pros and cons that you've witnessed, that would be helpful.
So I think on the pros side, obviously we're seeing a lot more kind of flexibility in the way that people are able to work sort of on, with the pandemic, you sort of that flexibility has inherently become built in, and that really is desirable to people. And I think it's really provided some opportunities for people to test some new equipment and new technology. So it's sort of, opened that door and allowed change to happen more quickly for this population. But I would say, that there are definitely some losses in terms of collaborative work, people who work in teams, that sort of creativity, that problem solving, that we've seen losses in that. We've seen losses in those face-to-face skills, that come with traditional office work. And then I think there's a whole sort of separate piece here in terms of, the appearance of work. I'm hearing stories about people asking family members to move their mouse around on their desk so they can run an errand during the day, or someone using a massaging chair, to make it look like things are happening. And I think, it's really time for us to start having conversations about, does productivity mean you sit at your desk in these set hours? Or does productivity mean that you accomplish the tasks that have been assigned to you? Because I think that is going to be very important kind of with this new model of work.
Yeah, those are great insights. And I've also heard, Rachel, about people actually having 2 different full-time jobs because they can move 2 mice at the same time. And so going back to the appearance of work, which I don't know how that's possible. That doesn't seem likely, but I have also seen a lot of that appearance of work insights coming through, and agree that we need to certainly have that conversation. Sarah, what pros and cons have you witnessed?
I think it kind of comes to some of the technology. So some of the younger generation are maybe a bit more tech savvy and have been able to adapt with working from home. They're a little bit more self-sufficient, in their tech. So, troubleshooting why the internet's not working, why this app's not working, and maybe even helping out some of their colleagues who aren't as tech savvy. But that also could be seen as a con as well, right? And causing a bit of a divide, right? A little frustration in trying to collaborate with your colleagues. And, if you're really good at Teams and, wanting to hop on video and your colleagues or other people in your team are not, it presents a bit of a challenge because it's different than how we did it pre-pandemic, where we would just call everybody into a meeting in the boardroom. So I do find that there's in some ways, it's a pro and a con. It kind of depends on the person. I mean, for us, I know we've been relying a lot more on Teams, like our Teams chat system, and it takes some getting used to, just with everybody's different tech abilities. And I think that sort of depending on what the employer has been providing from a tech solution, that can be a reason why somebody might stay or not stay with a company. Sort of evaluating those flex options. Like, if I can actually work from home because I want to be able to have this flex work life, but the company isn't really providing the tech or the resources for me, that sort of what's in it for me drive kicks in, and they're looking for somebody who can support that, because there are a lot of companies out there who have been able to adapt well in the pandemic to supporting people working from home.
For sure. Yeah, Lillian, do you have anything to add to the pros and cons from Sarah and Rachel?
I guess, yeah, I was just sort of echoing what they're saying, really. I think, I've really experienced people actually, rather than having 2 full-time jobs, actually finding a much better balance between their work and their life. I do think that's taken time over the pandemic it's taken a sort of relearning of how we do things. I think Rachel mentioned earlier, just thinking we need to think more about the model of work rather than we need to be sat in front of our computer from 9 till 5, and actually thinking about how we get the work done that's been assigned to us, rather than just this sort of screen time and moving mice around.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I think there's certainly more conversation to be had around there. As you guys all mentioned, the flexibility has certainly been a pro for companies to have to consider. Even some companies that were considered quite conservative in the past have been able to adapt to that flexibility in the workplace, which as a result has been that better work-life balance. I do still think we have a ways to go with that, though, for many, many companies out there. Also, I think that millennials do want and crave, as you guys mentioned, that tech piece of it, and they are willing to help the older generation adjust to that new style, sometimes only with a certain amount of patience for it, but they do want to try to push people into that next wave of technology. And then the increase of multitasking. Now, this is not referring to waving two mice around and holding two full-time jobs, but I do feel that with the pandemic, people have had to really readjust their schedule, and being on video and being in a meeting means that you really have to focus on one thing versus another, and it's caused people to have to adjust their multitasking ability there. Some of the cons in recapping too is that, and honestly, I can put it as a pro also, is that many, many people are suffering from mental health problems, but the pro side of that is the pandemic has really raised some additional awareness around that for companies, which we hope that everyone is able to get the help that they do need there. And being isolated at home or in a very different situation than they're used to can certainly escalate some of those problems. Obviously, the recession in the economy that we've seen is certainly not good for businesses and causes undue stress many times. And then that loss of skills related to the face-to-face interaction. So I recently saw an article that was surprising to me that stated the baby boomers are actually the ones that want to keep working from home full-time, and the millennials are the ones that want to go back to the office. And so thinking about that they want those learned office habits that they're lacking right now, they want that mentorship, and they're not able to get it right now in this type of environment. And then also, as one of you guys mentioned too, that what's in it for me drive kicks in. There's always that motive of how do I benefit from this? And that can be bad when you're looking at that greater picture of needing to advance the company to the next position. But looking on that also as a pro side is that they will hopefully push that agenda to have employee well-being part of their agenda in the future. And we have one more question. Lillian, I'm going to start with you on this one, but do you think that millennials are more adaptable? And we have talked about it a little bit, but more adaptable to change and ergonomic improvements than previous generations? They're not so stubborn, are they?
I don't think we're so stubborn, are we? No, I don't think so. No, I think they are quite adaptable to change. I think, they've had to be, that sort of age group has had to be resilient many times over, and I think that just makes them more adaptable to change. And even if we just think about it in terms of, the technology changes that millennials have had, and the rate of that technology change is happening, and changes in workplace over the past 18 months. I mean, we've really had to, adapt very quickly and change the way we work. And I think, the idea of the flexibility, the how they want to work, I think all of those things just sort of demonstrate that they are quite adaptable. Yeah.
Glad to hear you don't think millennials are the most stubborn generation out there, Lillian. Rachel, do you have any additional comments on the adaptability to change for millennials?
I mean, I'd agree. I think that, in particularly with respect to technology, definitely very adaptable. But I do think they have to feel the value in it in order to get them on board. So again, if they're not experiencing discomfort, sometimes you get a little bit less willingness to make changes to a workstation. Trying to convince someone that 5 screens is not the way to go, or that they need to reduce their screen time because they have headaches. Sometimes that falls on deaf ears. So I think with any generation, there's some stubbornness in some spots. But overall, I would say, they are quite adaptable.
Yeah, I'm sure you would get some interesting looks if you told certain millennials that they had to reduce either their YouTube, TikTok, or other apps down by an hour every day even. You might get some reaction based off those types of recommendations, but all for the greater good there. Sarah, any final comments from you on the adaptability to change?
I would 100% agree that I do think that they're a little bit more adaptable to change. I mean, even just think about the lifespan, right? As a kid, a millennial as a kid would have had no internet. It wasn't a thing back then. Laptops weren't a thing. Most households, not all households had a computer. And then, so during formative years, the internet gets in play. Computers are a part of the workplace. It's more regular. So, things changing now, it's been all part of the millennials' life, essentially. So I do think that sort of can make them a little bit more adaptable to the tech side of things, for sure. A little less stubborn when it comes to suggesting change. Everybody can be stubborn, I think that they're all generation aside.
I think those are all really great answers. As Sarah mentioned, being more adaptable to technology, and I think Rachel was the one that mentioned being more adaptable to some of those wellness changes, but you do have to feel the value in them. And it all comes down to that personalization, what's in it for me. They want the choice and they want the flexibility. But that being said, there is certainly ways to embrace that change in the workplace there. So I appreciate the time with the panel today. To wrap this up today, I just want to debunk some of those stereotypes that we talked about before. And before, we may have talked about them in a little bit more of a negative connotation, and it's time to switch more to the positive side of it. So some of the values of millennials is that they have meaningful motivation. If we can find purpose for that ergonomic recommendation, and they can see, as Rachel mentioned, that long-term value, they are more likely to understand that it's a good choice for them. They absolutely have a passion for learning. They're not closed-minded when it comes to learning about new topics. And their intuitive knowledge of technology can be great as different apps and softwares, and as the workplace evolves, those millennials can be our absolute best friend in changing that well-being environment within offices when it comes to technology as well. They also value that mentorship or that relationship with their superiors. So this has been a common denominator in every ergonomic program, but if you have that top-down management saying this is a good choice, that is where you're going to see the most success in your ergonomic programs. So still working on those superiors, having that trickle-down effect to the millennials is certainly a key for them that they will relate to. You want to challenge the status quo. So many times, as it came out today in the panel, they're challenging what benefits are available to them. What can you do for me that makes this special, that's not just normal? So challenging that status quo that's there. And they are adaptive to change. So when you do present that vertical mouse or a little bit different looking type of keyboard or some other type of piece of equipment to them, they likely are going to do a little bit of research for it, but they are adaptive to changing and trying that new behavior typically. And they do certainly place importance on the task versus the completion time. So this goes back to they want that flexibility to get their tasks done, but don't necessarily want that 9 to 5 workday. They want to have that task completion on their schedule there. And so how do we embrace the millennial stereotypes? With everything personalized, it's perfect for ergonomics. No one solution fits everybody. And so let's keep doing what we're great at and finding those problem-solving solutions for each individual person. Giving that positive feedback during the assessment can mean a lifelong change for that millennial. And so you're able to really help change that millennial's perspective for a long term there. Immediate response needed. Now, this one is a little bit harder sometimes depending on your company size, but trying to schedule them quick and providing clear expectations of what the follow-up looks like and the outcome of the assessment is certainly key. And then having no work ethic. This is the one that burns me a little bit because I do feel like millennials want to work hard and they want to do the best thing. So consider maybe a mentorship program, or if you have a way that superiors can work with some of those newer individuals in the workforce. They want to learn those habits. They just haven't had a chance to do so yet. They're obsessed with technology, but 73% of millennials have said that technology has made their work-life balance easier. And so if we are striving to have that better work-life balance out there, we as ergonomists and ergonomic professionals need to also embrace the technology and learn that if that's where our client base is really headed, to understand how the technology can help them there as well. And then everything for a cause. So many companies, and Kensington has done this as well, is starting to showcase those initiatives on sustainability and contributions to a greater cause. And so I know that many different people out there are looking at equipment companies or service providers that are doing something for the greater good, and certainly consider that when you're making your recommendations there. So to wrap up, I would encourage you to visit kensington.com for more information on the products that Kensington offers. We do have tons of blog topics out there, as well as tons of other great information. Our panel has been absolutely excellent today, and I appreciate all of their time. If you do have any questions for anybody out there, you can email me directly at ergoexpert@kensington.com, and I would be happy to pass those questions along. But I appreciate your guys' time today and look forward to working with millennials.